All right, we are taking our last look at every team's 2024 season as a whole before we tick over into 2025. Today, it is Hawthorn. But before we get started, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. Let us know how you think the Hawks went in 2024. So, let's get cracking. This season review is brought to you by Skills Beast, the best teaching apparatus to learn how to kick effectively with the correct technique every time. No matter what your age or skill level, Skills Beast will transform your kick. Head to skillsbeast.com to instantly kick better. And to help me break this down, AFL commentator and analyst Darren Parkin. Darren, Hawthorn were the biggest improvers in 2024, all thanks to whatever Hokball is.
Yeah, Hokball. I'm not a big fan of that phrase. Maybe I'm too old, but it worked, whatever it was. And yeah, incredible improvements. They were 1-6 and then went 13-3 from that point on. And if you look at the three losses, they lost to Geelong at Kardinia Park, which happens. They lost to Port Adelaide by a point in one of the most miracle losses you've ever seen, with the Burn Jones off the ground with about 8 seconds to go. And they lost to the Giants when they were 27 points in front in the last quarter. And then obviously that all led into that semi-final against Port where they could have won that as well. So they certainly took some beating and just so many improvements in terms of their numbers. They went from being ranked 16th for attack and defence last year in a 7-win season to being a top 4 defensive side and improving their scoring dramatically. Now, they did tease a bit at the end of 2023 that this was coming. They beat Collingwood, who went on to win the flag. They beat Brisbane at the MCG. They beat the Bulldogs in Tassie. They beat the Saints, who played finals last year. So there was some signs that they were building in this direction, but then exploded over the course of the year. So a bit of perspective, they conceded 100 points 13 times in 30 matches from the start of last year to round 6 of this year. They've only done it once in the last 16. So they've also conceded scores of 38, 42, 49, 47, 36 across the run. So they've really put the squeeze on some teams and, winning 5 in a row, having lost 5 in a row at the start of the year. And they're really only positives to look at with this Hawthorn year.
Yep, absolutely. Just made up some crazy numbers. All right, heading into 2024, at the start of the year, I don't think anybody had them in the top 8, let alone, getting as far as they did. So I think they did pass the mark.
Yeah, well and truly, they passed with flying colours. I mean, last year they improved, and I think most of us thought they would improve again, but it was a long way to go from where they were to play finals. So I thought they'd climb out of the bottom 4 and be pretty competitive. And even in the start of the year when they were 0-5, they were probably more competitive than that record would suggest. They came from about 8 goals down to give Geelong a bit of a fright on Easter Monday. They lost to Collingwood in gather round where they actually hit the post to hit the front with about a minute to go. So they could have picked up a couple of those victories. They kicked poorly against Essendon in round 1 when they were all over them early. I think they had 30 shots to 22 or something and lost that game. So there were some signs. But yeah, look, they 100% passed and top of the class. Pressure, work around the contest, and even contributions saw them become a side that's so good that they're almost premiership favourites for next year.
So looking at the lowlights for Hawthorn, and it's kind of a good thing, but their lowest point was the start of their season.
Yeah, and they inadvertently turned it into a bit of a missed opportunity in many respects. I mean, did they need that though? I mean, did that also teach them something? Some of those close losses and straighten them up. Was that just part of the journey for them? But yeah, I mean, because they were 0-5 and 1-6, their huge run got them to 7th at the end of the home and away season, where had they have split those games at the start, they would have finished 2nd or something like that with a couple of those close games. So it ended up being a bit of a mischance, as was the semi-final itself. They weren't at their best that night, but nearly pinched it. They hit the post again late to win that game, and then everything that came after it. And some key players, and this in turn is a potential positive, but Will Day missed a lot of the year, including both of their finals, and then Mitch Lewis, I think, only played 4 games for the year. So they're 2 extremely important players that they didn't have for large chunks of it. So you can turn that into a positive if you want.
All right, looking at the highlights for Hawthorn, so apart from their absolute emergence as a force to be reckoned with, 2 of the people that I've just loved watching this year has been Nick Watson and Carl Shadia.
Yeah, kicking plenty of goals and both very good in the final when they beat the Western Bulldogs and over the course of the whole season. And a lot of those unheralded midfielders emerging over the course of the season. Lloyd Meek in the ruck, also very important for them as part of that group. But breaking down some of those numbers, so they went from 16th in clearances last year to 7th. They went from 15th in contested possessions to 7th. And part of their pressure, they went from 18th to 6th in tackles, and overall pressure acts from 14th to 5th. So they were a very, very competitive side around the ball, and they were starting to beat up teams by the end of the year. So there's some numbers that reflect how they got a bit better in that space.
Yeah, Sam Mitchell seems to know what he's doing.
Who would have thought?
Well, this next segment is brought to you thanks to Skills Beast, who have been helping AFL players of all skill levels transform their kick. So who transformed their game for the Hawks in 2024? Massimo D'Ambrosio.
Yeah, and could give it to the list managers as well. In the off-season, they brought in him and Ginnivan, and they got Gunston back and didn't give up a first-round pick for about 4 inclusions. And look, D'Ambrosio, again, relatively cheap, 16 games in 2 seasons at Essendon prior to this year, and 507 disposals, lands in the All-Australian squad of 44, had a season-high 32 possessions in their elimination final win over the Bulldogs, became one of the best 5 or 6 players at the club, having come off obviously a very low base of only a handful of games previously. So that's a tremendous piece of recruiting and exactly how you become a good side.
Yeah, arguably one of the most transformative players across the entire competition.
No doubt.
Well, there's one thing we know here at zerohanger.com. It is headlines, and Hawthorn were in the headlines a lot. Obviously, the ongoing racism saga was happening this year still.
Yeah, it's been in the headlines for a little while. It was resolved, I guess, for want of a better expression. They had, a lot of the headlines were revolving around people that aren't at the club anymore, like Clarko and Chris Fagan and the like. But certainly that was a shadow that was unwanted, and hopefully for their sake and everyone involved's sake, they've put it to bed, and it looks like that might be the case. And then it really did turn into the free agency conversations and the recruiting, where they landed a couple of key position prospects, Josh Battle as a free agent, Tom Barrass from the West Coast Eagles, and how big a player they were going to be in that space was another heavy talking point. Little bits and pieces around their Dingley development and the like, but all pretty good news.
Yep. And I think one of the other things that everybody kept talking about was the Jack Ginnivan incident with Ken Hinkley.
Yeah, that obviously attracted a bit in terms of the back and forth. And look, Ginnivan, at the races again, and which is fine. But then, the little Instagram post, see you in Sydney to Brodie Grundy, and then obviously they get rolled in the final. Look, that's probably discussed it a bit, but that's the nature of it. If you live by the sword, then you expect to cop a bit that way. And there are a few people that didn't necessarily cover themselves in the best possible way, but I think that's a bit of a storm in a teacup. So.
Yeah, every time Jack Ginnivan does something, it almost crashes our website. So, always in the headlines, but we love him for it. All right, so the ins and outs for Hawthorn this year. We'll start with the outs. So a surprising one, Chad Wingard retiring.
Yeah, had some injuries in his time at Hawthorn, 31 years of age. So ideally it would have gone a couple more years, but just with the body and a few other things. But a good servant of a couple of clubs, played well at Port and had his run at Hawthorn. And then some delistings that weren't stunning. Denver Granger Barrass, Cooper Stevens and Ethan Phillips, Jack O'Sullivan and those sorts of players. And then the draft was relatively quiet after they landed Battle and Barrass. They got Cody Anderson at pick 64 from their academy, Noel Moraz at pick 35. They went a bit key position-wise in the draft, which is interesting given the trade strategy that they had anyway. But it was all about the trades rather than the draft for the Hawks.
Okay, so looking ahead to 2025, this is a really interesting one for Hawthorn because, as you said before, it's almost like they overachieved this year. They exceeded expectations by quite a big margin. So heading into 2025, what should we be accepting as success for them? Yeah,
if this is a checkpoint on the way to a premiership, they got there way earlier than expected. So do we now think that, they're just here now and they keep the progression going up into the top 4 and challenging for a flag? They're second favourite for the premiership in most markets behind the reigning premiers, who will almost always start as favourite. They beat them last year, so their grounding is really, really strong. So if they were to do the same thing, finish 6th, 7th, win a final. Would we classify that as a pass mark? We probably should, but I'm not sure we would. So I would think that their expectations internally would be, let's go, let's start another dynasty in Hawthorn fashion. So they are a club that wins flags.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I get the feeling that they're firmly of the belief that they're one of the big boys right now.
Yeah, I think they should just be happy for finals, but yeah, they should be contending for a flag. Well, that wraps it up for our season review for 2024 for the Hawthorn Football Club. Thank you, Darren. What a ride it's been for the Hawks this year.
Yeah, if you're a Hawthorn fan that's in your mid-60s, they've won 13 premierships in 63 years, the Hawks. It's a very nice contrast to life for some of us, but they're probably not too far away from the 14th on the shelf.
Absolutely. So let us know in the comments what you think is in store for the Hawks in 2025. Is it another year of Hokball? Will I finally figure out what that means? Let us know in the comments. Remember to like and subscribe and get all your latest AFL news from zerohanger.com. This season review was brought to you by SkillsBeast. Instantly kick better. Head to skillsbeast.com for more info.